All right. Welcome into another show of Hockey Royalty Podcast, the official podcast of hockeyroyalty.com. We have an excellent show today talking about trade rumors, the depth in Ontario, the signing of Jim Hiller. Let's get it on. All right, the triumphant is back. The Holy Trinity here. Joe, how was your vacation, big guy?
It was overall it was good, but I'm going to tell you right now, this was the first trip that my wife and I have taken. We went with a lot of her family, with a 3.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, which are the ages of my two boys. Totally different vacation when you're dealing with two kids of that age. It was chaos for the first day and a half, 2 days until they kind of got adjusted, and then it was good the rest of the way. But yeah, really, I don't think mentally I was there knowing what to expect. A little bit of a shell shock, I think, for the both of us in the beginning, but it ended up being a lot of fun. It was good. How was your guys? I listened to the show. It was a great show last week. You guys knocked it out of the park, as to be expected.
Thank you. Richard coming in and saying, hey, guys. Russell, how was All-Star Week? I mean, you're there in LA. How was that? Did you end up going? Were you trying to party with all the Kings players that were there, or were you not able to make it?
I thought about going to the home run derby at least. The All-Star game it didn't really seem too enticing to me. But the home run derby, I mean, you hadn't been in LA in forever, and you don't know when it's going to come back here. But unfortunately, I didn't make it back out there. But I mean, all in all, it seemed like a pretty cool event. I mean, the AL just continues to dominate the NL. I think that's 9 straight in a row. But, I mean, all-star games are all-star games. I mean, we've seen it with the NHL. They've been trying to think up of some sort of idea to kind of spruce it up a bit. The Pro Bowl is the Pro Bowl. I don't even think they're going to do it anymore. And then the slam dunk competition's kind of getting away from its heyday. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens with some of these all-stars games. It's kind of I'm hoping the NHL comes up with something cool in the future. I forget where it's going to be this year, but I'd like to see a little bit more innovation, because this past season was pretty cool with what Zegras and all them did with the dodgeball stuff during the stick handling and breakaway. But I want to see a little bit more, a little bit something. I like the ideas that they had with the Bellagio fountains too. That was pretty cool. But I don't know. Let's come up with some new ideas.
The only thing we know is whatever any sport comes up with, Twitter is going to complain about it. We know.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Can never make them happy.
You know what? Listen, like you said, these leagues, they're going to try to do some things. Not all of them are going to stick. And so that's what it is, though. You just appreciate that they're trying something different. I remember people complaining about the Bellagio thing. I don't know. They're trying.
Mm-hmm. It was something new. I mean, we'd never seen it before. It was a cool idea. Bellagio fountains in Las Vegas. But the thing that I do want to see them bring back the NHL, the draft at the All-Star game.
That was
I did like that, and I especially liked how drunk Drew Doughty was at the draft. That was pretty entertaining too.
Carter Scores coming here and say, hey, what's up, y'all? And Richard says, is it September yet? I miss hockey. Good thing we have the World Juniors coming up.
That's right.
Boys talked about Pinelli getting added to the Canadian camp roster. We saw a couple Swedes bow out, none for the Kings at least. Should be pretty interesting to see where these rosters get shaken up compared to where they were when it actually started. But we'll get to that to another week. We got plenty of talking about, and we're hitting it right out of the gate with everybody's favorite thing, trade rumors. The Kings roster seems set. It seems like we have only one way to go is sign those RFAs and let's start the season, but it never ends. Kings seem like the number one destination. I think it was 4th overall in the odds for Patrick Kane at 5-1. What do you guys think about these rumors, and what would it take for you to maybe get Patrick Kane? Do you think it's a move that makes the Kings, a cup contender with him in the top 6? I'll start with Joe on this one. What did you think when these rumors started flying out there?
I think the odds makers are going to just throw whatever they can out there. There's a number of teams, whatever. The Kings are a team that have made a little bit of noise, but no, I don't. A couple things. One, I don't see the fit just from a roster construction standpoint because, we've talked about they've got their RFAs to sign, which they can probably do with what they have. Although it could get dicey. It could, there's still 4 of them that haven't come back or haven't, inked yet. So that's tight as it is. So you're talking about having to move out probably two pieces at that point, and we've talked about now with the Fiala ad, you've got your top six set. We've already mentioned Diafalo, and where does he's probably going to be on the third line. So where does Patrick Kane go? I mean, I have to assume he's going to play in the top six if you get him. So is Trevor Moore out at I just don't see how it fits. I mean, and to the other point, you take a quick step back, he would have helped the Kings power play immensely. You look at his 5-on-5 numbers, though, they're very, very average, and that even me putting it nicely of late, this tail end of his career. So it's not like you're getting prime Patrick Kane in his at 5-on-5. He's an elite power play guy still, so which is something the Kings need. But I don't know. There's just no fit. It's fun. I get it. I just don't see the fit.
Do you agree with him?
Yeah, I agree with Joe, and I don't see the fit right now, at least, or in the offseason before we're talking. The thing with Kane and a lot of other guys we'll probably talk about too is the salary cap, and we've talked about this before that the Kings are right now they're kind of a cap-strapped team. I mean, like Joe mentioned, there's still 4 RFAs and Mikey Anderson, Sean Durzi, Anderson Dolan, and Gabe Velarde that still haven't even signed new contracts yet. So we don't even know if those players are 100% going to be back. I mean, we expect them to come back, but right now there's just not a lot of room cap-wise to add a lot of pieces, especially a contract like Patrick Kane's that's coming in at $10.5 million. This is my opinion about Kane. I don't see him getting traded till the deadline. And the reason I say that is because I think Chicago, I mean, everybody knows what Chicago's doing. They're tanking it's totally blatant tanking. But you have to be able to draw at least some fans to the arena. And if you have Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews still on the roster, fans will come. I mean, they'll come and watch. They'll wear their Patrick Kane jerseys. They'll wear their Johnny Toews jerseys. And they'll come and watch their favorite players play. So there's really not a lot of reason for them to trade Kane right now because I still see them getting pretty good value for Kane at the trade deadline. I mean, he's going to be this year's Claude Giroux, and look what the Flyers got for Claude Giroux. They got a pretty good package for only 25 games of Giroux in Florida. So I mean, if they're able to net a first round pick, a high end prospect, and then maybe even eat some of that cap, I think they're looking at a pretty hefty package come trade deadline, and that's something that maybe the Kings could look toward because I think a big question will be that we'll have to maybe talk about come closer to trade deadline is where is this Kings team now in their contention / going for it? Or I mean, if they're close to on that trajectory of a 9,900 point team, do they start really going for those high-end trade deadline rental pieces? Or they really kind of just wait and hold off? And that'll be something that will probably have to be addressed closer to February or March.
Yeah, and I think if you run into a lot of injury issues like you had with LA last year, there's just so many variables. And I think you're right. It probably does make sense from a deadline standpoint for Chicago. So, yeah, I think a lot would depend. Like, say, if there's an injury or situation to the Kings' top six, if maybe somebody like Trevor Moore doesn't take that, continue on what he did last year, and they're looking for that scoring winger again, maybe something like that could come into play where you're dealing with a lot less of a cap situation at that point. So
I'm gonna go devil's advocate here, just because the fact that agreeing with everybody doesn't make for good radio here, and I'd say why not? If rumor has it that Chicago is willing to eat 50%, you could see the likes of Iafallo leaving if they want it. They just brought in Victor Arvidsson. Victor Arvidsson's making $4-something million. Maybe they move him out. If they move out Iafallo and maybe Walker or a prospect that has the cap hit of like $1 million or $1.5 million that Chicago would want with some draft picks, I mean, you can make it work. And then that way you're having more slots down into the third line. As good as that line was, I mean, he's not Patrick Kane, and that power play significantly improves. And then you really do have an amalgam of the top six to where you can truly just invest in totally on chemistry during camp and roll out two powerhouse lines there. And I see Russell saying it at the deadline and I think Chicago would probably wait till then anyways, because I think there'll be more teams vying for the the play of Patrick Kane because his cap hit will be less. You know what your team is and where you are in the standings at the trade deadline. You know what your scouts are looking at for the 2023 draft. Like, we all know it's supposed to be a big draft, but how big? Like, okay, is worth a half season of Kane worth maybe the 15th, 16th, or 17th pick at that point? Maybe not. Do we go the 2024? I think there's a lot more knowledge with the teams at the deadline. But if the Kings, I think the Kings are easily if you look at the dumpster fire that Calgary is going through, and we'll talk about that in a second, and everybody's losing pieces here and there, the Kings could easily win the Pacific. So why not? I mean, I get it that he's a free agent and you risk it being a 1-year deal, and maybe that lowers the cost, or maybe it doesn't, and the Blackhawks are going to hold him for ransom. But the way the Blackhawks been trading, they've just been giving away players. So you should at least pick up the phone and see what it's going to cost.
Agree with that for sure. I think certainly in the summer or in the off season here, I think it's just difficult for a lot of teams to fit him, even if they are taking on half of it. But at the deadline, the King, because I think to Russ's point, the Kings are probably getting to a point now where, depending on where they are, they're going to start to be looking at these guys as buyers at the deadline rather than, just kind of standing pat. I think they're going to have to make some decisions here at some point, but certainly not right now.
They will also know more about their prospects. They'll know if Velarde's playing. They'll know if Turcotte is healthy all season. If Byfield's on pace to score 40+, which we thought would be a great season for him. And so, you could see that as a big move at the deadline.
Yeah, and I think, like you mentioned, Randon, that Chicago's kind of shot themselves in the foot with that DeBrincat trade. I mean, they really just kind of gave him away for pennies. So, I mean, if a team's coming to look to trade for Patrick Kane, Chicago can't be asking for more than what they got for DeBrincat. I mean, I understand that DeBrincat's an RFA, and you still had to re-sign him, but I mean, there's not a lot of chances that a player gets traded to a team and they don't re-sign a long-term deal. So, I mean, especially for Kane, who's only got 1 year left on his deal, and everybody knows that they're going to trade him. I mean, you're probably not talking about that high of a package or a price to pay. So, I mean, they would have to eat some contract because the salary cap is a huge issue right now, and that's just across the league for everybody. So they would have to eat some dollars there. But yeah, I think it's something to watch. Is that if, let's say, the Kings defense is looking pretty good, but the forwards are still a little bit of lack of scoring, and the power play isn't running well. I mean, what better guy to have on your team than Patrick Kane to run a power play? I can't envision that many.
The thing is, the Kings right now, and this is before Velarde and Anderson Dolan, they have 14 forwards under contract. Now, I know a couple of those, could be AHL bound. Maybe Rasmus Kupari starts in the AHL this year, depending on who makes the team, yada, yada. But regardless, there's 14 and soon to be 16 guys under contract that are just forwards. That's a lot. It's too many. So something's going to have to give. So to talk about adding another one to that, that's a lot of guys that are going to have to go out. A lot of guys, bodies and money.
Yeah, Richard comes in here. I see the Kings making a big move at or near the deadline, especially if the prospects down in Ontario produce and their values go up. Last on this Kane knowledge, Carter comes in. What about the signing Kane as a UFA next summer? Obviously, he's not going to be making $10 million, but he did have a good year points wise on a bottom feeder. I don't think the Kings could afford an aging Kane. I think he's still making $7-something million. I mean, $8 million.
I don't think so. Not for me. I mean, you really hope at that point, like you said, Randon, a second ago, that they're going to learn a little bit more about their prospects. Like at some point, somebody's going to have to force their way onto this team, right? Whether it's Kupari, Turcotte, Fagino, Romiak, like somebody's going to have to force their way. And if not, maybe that's a different type of problem that the Kings have. So I'm going to say no.
Let's move on to the next one here. Big Daddy Tkachuk up there in Calgary, coming down to kiss the shoes of Drew Doughty in this potential trade. That, like, the Flames is an accurate description of what's happening to that franchise right now. And he wants out of there. Openly said he's not going to resign, won't resign. So, putting them in a pinch there on this. And, what is a realistic offer? Because this guy isn't in his 30s. He's young. Over 100-point producer, but going to be probably wanting over $10 million. And so where, I mean, you're going to have to be giving up quite a few pieces to get a player of this caliber, not only draft picks, but salary cap to move out because, it might work this season with what he's making, but next season is already going to be a pinch because Kopitar's still making over 10. You have Doughty still making over 10. Fiala goes up to 7. Kempe goes up. And, so it's going to be a lot of these different contracts. Like, how are they all going to fit it in there? I'm sure when you get a player over, 100 points, Rob Blake says, I'll figure it out, because he's that type of player. But what are your thoughts on this one? Because this seems not only for a trade for this season, but for the future as far as an instant top guy. And then maybe you have a legitimate top 6 to the likes of that you see in Colorado or other places that are contenders for multiple years in a row. We'll start with Russell on this.
Yeah, it's crazy that they're trading Tkachuk. I mean, the offseason that the Flames are having right now, I mean, it's just I mean, you want to laugh because they're in the Pacific Division. This is great, but you almost feel bad for Calgary fans because, I mean, they really just – I mean, they had their moment, and now it's over. I mean, it's just shut, curtains down. They're going to – I don't know what they're going to do. But, I mean, from a Kings point of view as far as Tkachuk, I mean, there's – to put a percentage number on it as far as maybe the Kings make a new move for Tkachuk, I'd probably put it at like 2%, maybe 3%. I mean, there's 3 big factors here. It's obviously the salary cap is one. Then you have Calgary is probably not going to end up trading Tkachuk to a Pacific Division team because why would you want to play against a player, especially like Tkachuk, that you traded, 4 or 5 times a year? That would be terrible for your fan base. And then also, would Tkachuk want to play in LA? It seems like he's kind of destined to go play in a place like St. Louis, where his dad played, or maybe somewhere out east. But I mean, the Kings would have to clear so much cap space in order to do it. And what's interesting to think about is that I wonder if Rob Blake makes the Kevin Fiala move if he had known that Matthew Tkachuk would have been available. Because, I mean, Tkachuk is pretty much the epitome of the player that the Kings need. Now, I mean, you're talking about a net front presence. You're talking about a player who's willing to get in the face and put face washing people with his gloves and really antagonize a bunch of other players on the opponent's team. So that's somebody that the Kings have always needed, and he can score too. So it's going to be an expensive piece for any team that wants to get him.
Yeah, think Jack Eichel, right? From a trade piece standpoint, you're probably looking at a first-round pick. You're probably looking at a really high prospect and a young, legitimate roster player. The rumor going around today was that Jordan Kyrou out of St. Louis could be the centerpiece. The Kings, I don't know that they have a Jordan Kyrou that's ready, like that is young and like an impactful player. I mean, I guess you could argue Adrian Kempe maybe. Mm-hmm. And a first and a high prospect. I think that's where you're going with it. So in a hypothetical situation, I mean, I agree with Russ. Like, he's not coming to LA. But if you're looking at a package, it's going to be because rewind to last summer and the idea that Turcotte, Velarde in the same package and a first round pick, that was, whoa, we can't touch those guys. Mm-hmm. Does Calgary even do that? Like, you're right. I don't know. So you're going to have to really seriously move out some pretty significant prospects, not to mention
Buffalo got Krebs, which was Vegas's number 1 prospect at that point.
Right.
Not to mention Alex Tuck, yeah.
That's the thing in the Kings. So if you're looking at a similar type of deal, again, talking about the Blues offering Kyrou, there's just, I don't see that match for LA. And again, the Kings' top prospects are kind of in LA now. Kaliev could be somebody that has to go in that deal, right? If the Kings are going to be not trading Byfield, which I could understand, I think Kaliev is almost sure bet to be traded in a Tkachuk deal,
or Clark, whatever they.
Sure. So it would have to be something like that, which. Maybe that gets it done. But again, if you're Calgary, I really would try to not trade him in the Pacific Division. Again, like Russ said, I think St. Louis could make some sense. I absolutely think Buffalo could make sense. I think a team that missed out on Gaudreau, somebody like a Jersey, could make a ton of sense too. Mm-hmm. So, boy, bad for Calgary, really good news for LA because it's going to be a dogfight in that division. But having Calgary have these two massive blows as tough. Now, I don't know. Maybe Nazem Kadri is still out there. Maybe they go and kick the tires on him, but that's a tough blow to the Flames, no doubt about it.
Yeah, you're looking at a player in Johnny Gaudreau who I believe is fourth in points in the last 4 seasons in the NHL. Been consistent player. Lose one of the best young stars. I'd be interested to see if he's able to get himself moved to Ottawa to play with his brother.
Tkachuk, yeah. Although I think their top 6 is pretty nice right now. I think they're going to be looking at a defenseman, maybe a John Klingberg, something like that. They need to shore up that blue line. But yeah, that would be a lot of fun. That'd be a lot of fun.
Renee comes in here with with this pick here. Thoughts on this trade? Tkachuk for a 2024 first, Alex Turcotte, Alex Iafallo, sexy third Walker, and Trevor Moore. I think you're looking at the high prospects there. If they're rebuilding or they're doing a reboot, a 2024 isn't going to get it done. I think it would have to be next year's pick.
Yep.
Iafallo helps some cap space there. Same thing with Walker, but you're missing the high impact top player that could step in right away, which would have to be a Kempe type guy.
Kempe,
but I mean, that's the thing too. Is like, where does Calgary go now? I mean, they're probably not going to be a contender. I mean, these are 2 pillar pieces that teams would build around. I mean, you're talking about 2 separate $10 million contracts. And then now they have $20 million in cap space with no free agents to sign besides Kadri. And Kadri's probably not going to want to go there now because there's no one else to play with. So, I mean, does Calgary just go full rebuild now? Or do they really just keep trying to go for it? Because you look at their lineup right now and Michael Backlund is your highest paid player at $5.3 million. And then Jacob Markstrom makes 6, and then there's no one else. You still have Lucic on the team. There's not a lot of room. I mean, the best thing that is going on for the Kings is the total dismantling of some of these teams in the Pacific Division. I mean, look at all the goal-scoring talent that's leaving. I mean, Max Pacioretty left Vegas. I mean, Johnny Gaudreau left. Matt Tkachuk's leaving. JT Miller might leave Vancouver. I mean, that's like almost 200 goals that are leaving Pacific Division, and the Kings have added Kevin Fiala. So, I mean, this has been an outstanding offseason for the Kings, and where they only really made one big move.
Yeah.
So it's been great.
The Calgary situation reminds me, and I know I reference Buffalo a lot. I live out in this part of the country, so it is what it is. But when they lost Briere and Drury in the same offseason, their two of their top scorers, it's just like a huge blow that they really had a hard time recovering from. But they still had Thomas Vanek. Like, they still actually add some pieces where Calgary, though, man, they do have Lindholm. Like, I don't know. It's going to be see what else they add before. Let's see what else they add. Let's see what happens.
Mangiapane's still there, yeah. So,
like, although he's an RFA, they haven't done that yet. So, like, listen, this is a huge blow, and it's hard. I'd be hard pressed to see them be a team that's like going to contend to win the division, but I wouldn't yet. Let's wait to see the rest of the offseason, write them off for like a team that's going to grind themselves to a wild card. Remember, this is a Daryl Sutter team. They do have a good goalie. They've got some good defensemen. They've got some decent pieces. They're just now missing their legit star power, which is, I don't know how they recover from it, but it depends. I think we'll see the rest of this offseason if they go full rebuild, if we see more guys on the way out. But I think their heads are probably spinning right now because it seems that both of these, like, I know Gaudreau told them basically the night before, right? Free agency, whatever. So, but at the same time, if you're a GM or a good one or an organization, you have he might not come back. So you have that in the back of your head, right? Like, so you're trying to plan. I don't know that I don't know what the conversations were with Tkachuk, but I don't know if they had a scenario where they were losing both of them. Like,
there's no way you can blame management up in Calgary. What were they supposed to do? Just trade all their good players during this really high? They were first in the Pacific Division.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
And now they might not even make the playoffs. It's crazy.
Yeah, like they've been told basically like in the 11th hour that, oh, hey, by the way, your best 2 players are coming back. And it's like, you may have a plan if Gaudreau, who you know was going to be a UFA, right? So you may have planned for, okay, he may go, we'll have a plan in place to go this way. But then the Tkachuk thing spins out of control. It's just like, holy crap, now what?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Carter Scores comes in here. Hot take. If I'm Calgary, I try to trade away Elias Lindholm before the season starts. He's not going to produce offensively without Tkachuk and Gaudreau. Sell his value at his highest. Could be something interesting. If they're going full tank mode, they might, but I think they're going to try to.
That would be a kicker.
And that's the thing is like Calgary's now they're going to be teetering on this fence of like where they're not necessarily good enough to win a Stanley Cup, but they're not bad enough to get a player like Connor Bedard.
Right.
So it's like, I mean, you look at their lineup; it's not a Stanley Cup winning team, and no matter who they have, they could have John Klingberg and Nazem Kadri. I don't think they're a Stanley Cup winning team. So it's just a tough situation for Calgary. But
to your point, like they're not like bad enough because they have Lindholm, they have Toffoli, Dylan Dubé's an interesting piece. Mangiapane, assuming they get him re-signed, and their back end's not bad, right? Noah Hannafin, Rasmus Anderson was good. Tanev, Zadorov, like and obviously they have a good goalie in Markstrom, so they're certainly not bad enough to be a bottom 5 team.
Maybe they panic and go get Kane.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, they have to do something. I mean, it's either going to be go full rebuild or whatever.
Do you think, just throw another team out there that, because I know St. Louis is out there, and we've talked about the East, which seems to make sense for Tkachuk. What about Anaheim?
Yeah, that's a
prospect.
I was thinking the same thing.
Right? Maybe prospects. They have cap space. I don't know if they see themselves as like ready to make that big move. Maybe they don't want to deal away these prospects quite yet because they're still building. But
he could be their Panarin, like for the Rangers, or that move before they're ready. Like they brought in Panarin like 2 years before they were good. And just like these types of pieces don't happen very often. Maybe the Tkachuks don't come around very often. Let's get this guy and let him carry along these prospects, and the prospect pool will get there.
Again, same thing though, Pacific Division, but wouldn't.
I mean.
And then therefore you probably given up a Mason McTavish or
and that's exactly who I was going to say. I mean, Mason McTavish is supposed to be like a Matthew Tkachuk. So if you're looking at, I mean, the thing with the Flames is that, you don't want to trade in Pacific Division, but I mean, if the Ducks offer you a McTavish and maybe even add Drysdale too to Tkachuk, and I mean, those are 2 high-end prospects that the Ducks are getting rid of, but they still have a lot of good young talent there. And Tkachuk is only 24 years old, so you're getting Matthew Tkachuk coming off a 40-goal season all the way through his prime, most likely. So, I mean, it's going to be a haul. It's going to be a haul that he's going to
hope he goes east. Hope he goes east.
Yeah, exactly.
Little fan question here before we get to our sponsors at DraftKings. Anyone want to talk about how we have nothing left but lefties in the forward group? Only righties are Arvidsson and Velarde, and I'll throw in Kupari there. We've talked about it a little bit on this pod, especially Joe and I, when it comes to the power play, is that they have all lefties. And so it's hard to set up the one-timers from that bumper role. And so, in the 5-on-5, it is what it is. The players move around. But I think it is a big deal when it comes to the power play and how you organize chemistry and the one-time shots. What are your guys' thoughts on this? And who are some of the righties that, maybe should get more opportunities? I mean, 2 of them are Velarde and Kupari, and they're on the fringe of making the roster.
Right. Well, again, I mean, and this is why, and we'll see. And you guys touched on it, I think, in the last week's show about Elias Anderson and the contract that he's coming in with, where it's kind of a low risk, and if it doesn't work, they can move on. But from a righty standpoint, that's Kupari and Velarde. I still struggle to see the as much as I love Velarde, I don't see I don't know if the Kings see a fit for him right now. It's a good question. And I don't know. I mean, their roster is pretty much is what it is. I don't know that Fagemo, I mean, I guess he could, if he has another big camp, maybe, but I don't think he makes this team over anybody. I don't know that I consider it a problem. I think you bring up a good point, Randon, on the power play. It can be an issue depending, because I wouldn't be surprised if Velarde and Kupari do not make the opening night roster, just given the guys that they have decided to bring back. So I don't know. It's an interesting situation. I don't know that I recall seeing a roster quite like that. Up front and at this level.
Yeah, I don't. it's funny because I didn't really notice it till maybe later on in the year last year. So I think it was Jesse Cohen that pointed it out to me about all them on the same side, and it's like I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing, but yeah, I mean, I guess the power play there could be some problems with it. I mean, it's something I guess you could ask Todd McClellan about and just see maybe is this an issue or. But I mean, I don't know. It's an
certainly
interesting. It's unique, yeah, exactly, and it's something that I've never really noticed. Like I don't really pay attention too much until about how many righties are on a team, how many lefties on a team. But to have that much of a majority compared to lefties, it's different. It's strange.
I think what helps LA is they do have a lot of guys that can play both sides. Like you have Kevin Fiala can play both sides. Adrian Kempe's played both. Alex Iafallo has played both. Trevor Moore has played both wings. So I think even Kaliev has played both wings, which honestly, like it may seem common. It may seem like, well, duh, but it really isn't. I mean, there are guys that are just like Luke Robitaille. Did you ever see him on the right side?
Mm-hmm.
No. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are left wingers and they struggle on the right side. They're just not the same player, or vice versa. So I think it probably helps ease some of that knowing that they do have guys that a number of guys that are versatile enough that can play both wings and play them both effectively, like Victor Arvidsson can do both as well. Dustin Brown started to do both as well, especially second half of his career. So if you have guys that can comfortably do it, it becomes less of an issue because that's not always the case. I mean, not every player can be that interchangeable and that versatile. So it probably does help that the Kings have a lot of guys that have experience on both sides.
Before we get to the DraftKings as well, Austin Matthews 2024 book it. All right. So DraftKings coming here. Let's get a word from our sponsors. The action never ends at DraftKings Sportsbook, especially this summer, with tons of ways to win, to bet on all your favorite sports. You can fuel your fandom and feel the heat of the season like never before. Plus, right now, DraftKings Sportsbook is giving new customers a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's right. Make your first bet up to $1,000. And if it doesn't win, you'll get another shot to cash in. You can throw down on all major action for baseball, golf, MMA, and more. Plus, with same-game parlays, spreads, money lines, over-unders, and prop bets, get your betting options feel endless. Hey, who's going to win out of any of the divisions in baseball? Who's going to win the home run streak, RBIs? Is there going to be a Triple Crown winner? You can bet on all that and more at DraftKings. Best of all, DraftKings is safe, secure, reliable. You can deposit and withdraw cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code THPN. Make your first deposit and get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That is code THPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions may apply. See show notes for details. All right, boys. Well, let's get into some signings that don't affect the cap because they're going to be playing in on Ontario here. We have three here because we didn't really talk about Frederick Allard getting re-signed with Matty Villalta, but they bring him back. Phoenix Copley, a goalie. He probably would be goalie 3 and the veteran down there for the Reign. And then Toby Piquet-Bisson, a.k.a. Toby Beeson. So let's start with Frederick Allard. Obviously, Joe and I loved his game last year. Very hard shot, good on the power play, good veteran presence. Joe, you glad they brought him back? You think he brings some stability to that young core down there?
I think so, especially because Cameron Gaunt's moved on. Austin Strand is gone. So they had some guys, Christian Wolanin. So they did lose a few veterans from the back end. I think he's a good ad. I suspect that he's going to probably start on the third pair right D. Because I'm expecting Jordan Spence to start in Ontario. Helge Grimes will be the second right D and Allard the third. And like you said, he's very versatile, can play the power play. Good veteran guy to have, good solid AHL defenseman. I think he was a good ad for them last year. So, I think it was an important piece to bring back for Ontario.
Anything to add?
Yeah, I think with the left side of the defense, like you mentioned, with Strand, Wolanin, and Gaunt's all leaving, I mean, there's a void there. So, I mean, to bring back Allard and then Piquet-Bisson, he just came off a long playoff run with Laval Rockets. So, I mean, you're bringing in some really good AHL playoff experience for a team that's expected to make another long run and to be good again. I mean, the talent in Ontario, it just seems like each year we talk about they're just getting better and better almost. I mean, you're adding Martin Chromiak to the team. Sammy Elenius is going to be on it full time. Akil Thomas and Alex Turcotte are expected to be fully healthy this year. So, I mean, this team could be better even without Martin Frk on the team. So it should be a good team. And I'm sure Rob Blake is trying to shore up his missing pieces there to make sure that they go on a longer run than the first round exit they had this past season.
What's kind of interesting is the same piece that I guess you could say the Kings are missing. It was the lefty is, I guess he's not quote unquote missing. They have plenty of guys that can play the role, but for a roster spot that we talked about a lot as the Kings may be going to try to get or need. Same thing in Ontario. I mean, they have Paquette Brisson that they brought in, Kim Nu-Sayanen, and there really isn't another left shot D. As I mentioned, Gauntz, Wolanin, Phillips was traded last year. Moverare could be the guy if he starts in Ontario, of course. But will they want to expose him to waivers? Again, last year it was one thing to do it. But this year he got a little bit of NHL experience. Maybe if there's some teams that are a little bit more interested in him, maybe it's a little bit more of a risk this year, but I don't know. But so they also are I don't think they're done either, because I think they still have to figure out who else is going to play the left side. I did see, and actually, Russ, I don't know if you had a chance to see much of him, but I believe Inamoto was at camp, so maybe he's going to get a little bit of a look and get a chance to make the team on the left side of the D. They brought him in from college last year, late in the season, so maybe he's an option. So there's still some spots to be filled on the back end, much like the NHL team. The forwards, there's a ton of them, and how they all get sorted out, anybody's guess. Just to feel like we're having the same discussion as we had last year, Rando, as we head into the season.
Yeah, so Toby comes in, for people who don't know, he's 25 years old, out of Quebec, Canada. He's 6'3", 194, perennial minor leaguer, so AHL, ECHL. Had 55 games last year with Laval, and not including the 15 in the playoffs. Had 19 points in the regular season, and was a +3. So just a steady Eddie back there, a big size that can help, clean up some stuff there. So I thought that was a good signing as well. Let's get into the goalie, Phoenix Copley. We got a little debate on this online with some of the fans there, which is interesting because you look at the prospect rankings that came out. The reason why the Kings are so far down is their goalie depth isn't that great, or they haven't had a goalie rise up to the occasion of a Cal Peterson previously. Maybe the Kings don't feel that Matty Villalta is ready to spell if they do get some injury problems. And that's why they brought in Sparks last season, and it looks like they're bringing in Phoenix Copley. Let's go into his stats real quick before we talk about the move. 6'4", 201. He's 30 from the North Pole. Tell Santa hello. Last year, 35 games, 2.38 GAA and 913 save percentage. Also playoff experience with the Hershey Bears. Was there 4 seasons and also has played, it looks like, 29 games in the last since he's been with Hershey up in Washington. So he's got NHL experience, got AHL experience, and so does this scream not enough confidence in Villalta or Hrenek to spell Quick and Peterson for, like, Sparks played 2 games last season, so we'll say 5 or less games. Does this speak not enough confidence in those guys?
I don't know if it's like something to be worried about, the goaltending depth that the Kings have. I'm kind of on that end where I'm more of a wait and see. I'm a little bit more patient in terms of waiting to see how Villalta and all these other prospects that turn out. But as far as bringing in Copley, it's just that Garrett Sparks move. You just want to have some sort of veteran presence that is willing to step in and not have Matt Villalta's first games maybe come in an emergency recall or something like that. I mean, you want to have somebody who's got a little bit more experience, especially for a team that's looking to contend now going forward. So, I mean, with Villalta, it's probably going to be another full year in Ontario. I mean, who knows? Maybe they do like what he does, and they do end up bringing him up, and they leave Copley down there. So I don't know. Maybe that's his decision to have later in the season, but it's just a smart move just to have more experienced goaltending in the pipeline in case it's needed.
Yeah, I had made the opinion earlier in the offseason that given the crop of young guys, right, with Lucas Perique Ingham, Villalta, Hrenek, that, you know what, maybe they didn't need to add the veteran, because now Villalta, remember, he's played up 3 seasons now in the AHL. It's not as if he's a young pro, like a first year pro, rookie pro. So I almost felt that he is, I know he's only 23, but he's kind of a veteran of the AHL with the few seasons he's had under his belt. So I was kind of the opinion, preference, that they didn't go this route and just kind of really let Villalta and Hrenek and Parikh, Ingham, and let those guys really, play it out and see how they develop. But sure, I mean, I guess I can see the logic here with Copley. I mean, it's not like he's got a ton of NHL experience. Like you said, Randon, he's got, 30 games worth of NHL under his belt. It's not as if this is a veteran with loads of NHL experience. So I guess you feel more comfortable with Phoenix Copley than one of the, pick your, Villalta, Parikh, Hrenek, I guess. I don't know that I'm like overly confident that Copley is that much more of a safety net, but it does help. It does help add a little bit of depth to that.
I was not a fan of the signing.
I mean, I don't know that I won't say I'm necessarily a fan. I get it, I guess. Like, if I don't know, I
don't think it's hard to understand, but in my thought process is this: there's lots of question marks with Cal Peterson. If Quick goes down, then there's only 10 back-to-backs all year long. So make Cal Peterson earn his $5 million. Like, that's you got to ride him and
Copley
let him
do it. Like the Copley, if you have to, I'm sorry to cut you off, but like if you have to rely on whoever this guy is, Copley, Sparks, whatever, like this veteran guy, if you have to rely on him, you're probably in a lot of trouble. Like you're hoping that guy has to come in and spot and play like 2 games. Right, because whether it's Quick or Cal that goes down, let the other one ride it, and you're hoping that this guy can just spell you here and there. And if you don't think that one of the other guys can just give you 60 to 120 minutes worth of action just to spell, I guess. But again, I get it. And again, sorry, Randy, to cut you off, but.
No, you see teams win with e-bugs, like guys that are like bagging groceries and stuff like that, like for a game or two. And you heard it in Yannetti's, what he values and what he thinks of goalies is usually they're draft year +6 or +7. This is draft year +6 for Villalta. Like, this is his chance to make that next step to see if the Kings, should sign him to another deal. And so like him getting the most games as possible is good. And then you have Hrenek coming out of college, played 5 years there. This is, draft year +6 as well. So it's like you have 2 goalies that are on the fringe of showing whether they are NHL caliber or NHL backup or NHL starter goalies. And then you're going to take games away from them to have an insurance policy that may play 5 games this season. And like you said, if both Cal and Quick get injured, you're screwed either way. So like, what is the point of signing this guy on there? I would rather have Villalta play a game here. I'd rather have a Hrenek play a game there and see what you have with a really good defense over a guy that's played 30 NHL games. Like, to me, it makes no sense because they have Parikh that they can bring up. They have Ingham they can bring up. I don't know what they're planning on with Hugo Markkinen because we're at kind of like a salary contract, like caps, level there, but he was at development camp. So they're still in his mind as well. And for me, like a goalie the level of Phoenix Copley, couldn't you trade for him mid-season if you needed to? Like, couldn't you, like, I guess if the Kings were really desperate, they trade for a backup goalie from another team. Yeah, they might have to overpay, but we have plenty of assets. Like, I don't understand why you're making this desperation move before the season even started, when in reality, you probably won't use them.
Well, because this idea that he's like and again, I get it. He's a veteran. He's 30. He's got some, I guess, NHL experience, but like, look at what Vegas did, right? So they have Lehner. I guess they have Laurent Brossoit still under contract, if I'm not mistaken. They signed Michael Hutchinson. That is an NHL safety net. Michael Hutchinson. He's got 130 games of NHL experience. He ain't a starting goalie, but he's there in case what hits the fan, right? Like, they're not going to be relying on Michael Hutchinson in any way. But again, this is not like, I don't mean to be like a knock on Phoenix Copley. It's just like, okay, he's got 30 NHL games. This is I don't know. I guess I'd rather go like if they were going to try to acquire another goaltender this offseason to add to the crop, I would prefer it to be some sort of a younger prospect, I guess. But that becomes difficult too, and you got to kind of wait stuff out and see how that shakes. But I don't know. I don't. It is what it is. He's obviously there to be a veteran safety net guy. It's just.
I think we're also kind of just assuming too that if, say, Quick and Peterson do go down, that Copley would be the first one called up. But I don't know. I mean, Villalta, when that injury happened to Quick during the playoff series, Villalta was the one that was called up. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to put too much into that because we don't really know what was going on. But that was the name that was on the transaction wire. So,
Right.
I mean, who knows? I'm with you, Brandon. I'd love to see Villalta get a game in. It's time. Yeah, I mean, for all the doubters out there that are kind of questioning the prospect depth for goaltending, I mean, let's see what a player like Villalta can do. I mean, when was the last time we saw a really drafted player from the Kings go in and go in for the Kings? I mean, it's been a while. So I mean, why not see what the kid can do? Because Joe, this is going to be his third full season now. So
yeah, the
he's
other
got
ones
some
were
time.
shorter. Yeah, they were shortened seasons, obviously because of the situation. But I believe he's going into his 4th pro season, if I'm not mistaken. It's like I don't know. And listen, the question around the goaltending is very fair. None of them. I mean, Villalta has had the most experience, and yeah, maybe this year was a better year, but it wasn't great. Let's not call let's just call spade a spade here. It just wasn't. It still wasn't great to where he showed he's ready for the NHL. I don't disagree that it'd be nice to see him get a game, but I'd be also hard pressed to say that he's earned it. That said, like you have other guys that I said it before, like don't be surprised if one of these, if it's Parikh or Ingham or Hrenek, emerges into something. I mean, it's very, very difficult with goaltenders. That's why I don't know, just taking time away from them for we'll see where Copley fits, I guess. And again, I don't know. Maybe if because Villalta was the lion's share. Like even with Sparks there, he was the starting goaltender, and Sparks was there to spell him. And if that's what Copley is, fine. I don't know where Hrenek plays now. If they're going to carry 3, I don't know how that. I guess we'll see how that all shakes out, and we have time for that, right? It's still only
Loan him out to Berlin.
There's plenty of time for all this stuff to get worked out, but I don't know. I quote unquote get it, but like,
let's see what the young kids can do.
Yeah,
play the kids. Let's bring it back.
Why not?
Richard comes in here and says maybe they sign him for strong competition, and I just, competition is something that you need when it's really open, but it's not open. Like it's Villalta's job. And then you're taking away reps from Hrenek. So like it just seems like a move that doesn't make sense to me here. Like I get it, but I don't agree with it. Let's move on. Let's move on to coach signing. You know, the big signing right here, Jim Hiller coming in to be the assistant coach here for your Los Angeles Kings, coming in to vamp the power play. If you look at it, was coaching with the Islanders. The Islanders last season, even with their bad season, was 22%. Which put them 12th. They're really only 0.8 difference between being top 10 with the Calgary Flames. And if you see the Kings are way down the list at 16%. So, you know, if you could see the Kings get up to 22% there, I think we all would be ecstatic. Looking at his resume and obviously the rosters configured different with other teams. What do you guys think of this hire? And did it address was it a type of coach that addressed the necessity on the power play?
Go ahead, Joe.
I'll just say, listen, I won't, and I'm not going to pretend to be, I don't know a ton about him. I will pretend to have a lot of knowledge about assistant coaches in the NHL. That said, he's obviously run some power plays. That's been his focus, if you will, during his time that he has been in the league. You know, I think it's just gonna be different. I want to see, and what I mean by that is he's getting a totally different roster than he had on the island, and then he had prior in Toronto. So what he's going to want to do we'll see. I'm very curious. I'm very interested to see what happens and what he decides to do and the configuration. I mean, listen, we're probably going to see a version of a 1-3-1. That's what every team these days pretty much runs. It's just a matter of, where some of the action points. Is it behind a lot of, we've seen some teams go behind the net. We've seen some teams use much more cross seam passes. Some teams utilize the bumper, like we talked about last year. The Kings didn't utilize the bumper and they didn't utilize down low. They were very perimeter, shot from the point, shot from the perimeter. That's how they operated. Will he try to do that? The Islanders were notorious for being a team that, now this was more 5-on-5, but they killed teams in high danger chances, even when they were not a high scoring team, and they would get killed in possession, but they would own the high danger. So maybe what we'll see now more is maybe we'll see more usage of the bumper, and they look to get more of those high danger chances, and they see more cross seam passes, because we didn't see a lot of that in LA. It was all perimeter. Maybe that's one change I would look to, or one thing to look out for as we get to preseason. We start to see some power play work. That could be one thing, is maybe more utilization of the slot area on the power play.
Yeah, I mean, with Hiller's experience, you have to like everything that you see. I mean, he was the power play specialist for the Islanders on a team. The Islanders team doesn't really have a lot of skill guys, so kind of fits the Kings kind of mold. That the Islanders and the Kings play a very similar 5-on-5 game. So if he can translate that kind of success that he had on the power play for the Islanders team to the Kings, that'd be great. And then also going back to his time in Toronto. So, I mean, there's a lot to like with that. But, I mean, for me, I wasn't really one that was going to, I guess, say that a lot of the power play woes were Sturm's fault. And it's not really a coach's fault on the power play. I mean, yeah, you can question some of the setups and the personnel that it's used. But, I mean, the team is a team. I mean, you can only use the players that you're given. And the Kings last year,
he wasn't using the players that he was given.
No, and that's the thing. That's some questions you can have, but you don't have Doughty. You don't have Sean Walker. Those were two players that were running the power play a couple years before. I mean, the Kings' power play has never been great, but they never really had some elite talent. I mean, Adrian Kempe is now considered finally a first-line winger. He's only coming off his first 35-goal season. So, I mean, you add Kevin Fiala, who's hopefully going to help. So, I mean, if you add the personnel, the power play should be better. And now that Hiller's in, he should help and hopefully bring in a little bit more of an experience in that system. But, I mean, yeah, it's Kevin Fiala and Drew Doughty and Sean Walker. Those are players that are going to have to step up in order for this power play to be successful. And then one thing I will add with Fiala, too, that I saw actually in his time in Minnesota is that he played that Adrian Kempe zone entry role a lot. So that's something to watch. That, I mean, when Kempe went down, the Kings couldn't enter the zone if the doors were wide open. I mean, nobody was. I mean, I think they tried Athanasiou, and he was having trouble. So now that you have Kempe on the first unit who's able to entry into the zone pretty easily, and you have Fiala in the second unit to do the same, I think that'll also help pretty well.
Byfield did it for Team Canada all the time on the power play. I think that would be another play. He did it for the Reign as well. I think we talked about it ad nauseum that we just needed one of the special teams units to be good. Like either both need to be in the middle 10 or one needs to be in the top 15 for them. You know, they probably would have been a 106-point team. They definitely probably would have won the 7-game series if we could capitalize more there. I think they're making the adjustment. They're choosing the offense there. And I think Yanni is, been T-Mac's boy. So I think Drew solves a lot of those problems and elevates the personnel on both the penalty kill and the power play. But then you're also running into the situation, and Drew will never say it, but you're running into the Kopitar situation where is his minutes going to get too high for his age? And should he limit his special teams usage to be more fresh 5-on-5 late in the season? And so I wonder, what they're going to be looking at there. You said Sean Walker, obviously Jersey will be there. And so maybe on games that, they're up in the score and they get a power play, maybe Drew is not on that and they go with, another guy. I don't know what you guys think about that, but I think it's a good sign. I think they addressed something that they needed to do. I think Marco Sturm doesn't have the experience to run a power play or be a specialist. He was brought up there to learn from T-Mac, and then he went down from a mutual decision, from the team to be a head coach. And I think that's what he was brought in to be, was groomed to be a head coach from what he did with the German team, and was thrown into a role that necessarily he wasn't an expert at necessarily, or didn't have the experience. And Hiller definitely has the experience on multiple levels forming offensive game plans and being a power play coach.
Yeah, and a quick aside is we talked about the rain a little bit earlier. That's another thing to really consider. This was a pretty offensive team, obviously, last season. At the start of it was under John Wroblewski, who was known to be this young, wanted to get things going forward. So I'll be curious to see what Marco Sturm and how he approaches the Ontario Reign, both 5-on-5 and the power play for that matter. But I think that I don't think it can hurt, right? The Kings are coming out of really, really bad power play. So, but again, as Russ and I talked about too, like I'm not one to like Marco Sturm and we're just going to be better because Marco Sturm's gone. Like I don't know. Like I think it's the NHL. There's no way Todd McClellan that when they start running the power play, they talk about the power play that the head coach just leaves and goes home. Like they have meetings, they watch video together. There's no way Todd McClellan wasn't involved in the power play. Of course he was. Like in some capacity he was. So I don't want to put it all on Marco Sturm and say Marco Sturm just has no idea what he's doing. There was some collaborative effort there. It's just obviously we don't know what that was, but of course there was input from the head coach. So, but I think you make a good point, Randon, that Hiller has got years of experience under his belt doing this at the NHL level.
Yeah, I'm also glad you brought up Kopitar because it'll be interesting to see how they divvy up his minutes now that he's getting up there in age. So I mean, I have the stats right here. Last year he played a minute 42 in penalty killing time per game. So I mean, for a player at his age and what you need Kopitar, he's your first line center. You need him to be more offensively or more productive offensively. So I would love to see him cut back on that penalty killing time. I mean, as good as he is, but you look at how good the penalty killing was; it wasn't that good. So I mean, obviously he brings his veteran experience, and he's one of the best two-way players in the game. But I mean, with the way the power play was, you have to try to save Kopitar's minutes and keep him fresh for 5-on-5 and fresh for the power play. So with the amount of young talent and good, I mean, I guess forechecking kind of pest players like Iafallo and Trevor Moore and Lizotte, those players should be playing the penalty kill, and they should leave Andrei Kopitar to focus on the 5-on-5 and the power play, so that way he can be rested for that.
And those are hard minutes, and it's solely because of the age that he's getting to, right? I mean, I think he's still a first line center. I think he's still a first power play guy, and talent wise is still a first penalty kill guy. But you have to find areas where you can try to back off. And I think Russ, you make a good point that the penalty kills are hard minutes, and he's not one of these forwards that doesn't, he's strictly offensive. He plays a 200-foot game, so he's already playing hard minutes as it is. So if they can find a way to scale back some of his PK time, I think that'd be beneficial. Maybe what you do is you start Kopitar with that first D zone faceoff, and as they're able to get a clearance, they can make a change, something along those lines, just to lessen his minutes, keep him out there for a big faceoff, but lessen his minutes as we go.
Yeah, if Richard comes in and says if the Kings power play makes it through in the top 15 in the NHL, it's a damn win.
Top 20.
Yeah.
Top 20 would be nice.
We need the PK to be above 80%. And Richard comes back in here and says some of the kids need to be groomed into being badass penalty killers. And I'll leave us with this thought here, and we've talked about it ad nauseum on Making It Rain, is how do you keep a spot once you make it to the NHL? And that is doing roles that you're not necessarily accustomed to doing. How is Fagemo going to consistently make the roster? Well, yeah, he can score 30 points on the Reign, but he's not going to get that role on the Kings right away. You see Kaliyev having to play fourth line minutes. Well, Fagemo was one of the best defensive forwards on the Reign last season from a lot of the analytics, and he would have to work on his penalty killing. Talk to the guys like Jared Stoll to earn those minutes and get quality time. So that way, when an injury happens, you're able to make that stay there for good. I think that's something that we're going to see a lot of these kids have to be pressed to do, is earn spots by playing special team specialist.
A couple things. We saw Fagemo play penalty kill in Ontario. So there's a good and bad to this. Fagemo, a lot of their top players, Fagemo played penalty kill. Turcotte played penalty kill. So Jared Anderson Dolan played penalty kill. So they had these guys that did kill penalties. The downside is they had one of the worst penalty kills in the American Hockey League. So, yes, they got the experience. Yes, they played penalty kill. Wasn't really effective, though. Now, that's not me saying it was Samuel Fagimo's fault or Janderson Dolan's fault, but the point is they did play it, so they do have that experience, which is only going to help them as they go up. But, it wasn't overly effective in the AHL either, so we'll see.
Well, it's been a good episode, boys, that we're crossing right over the hour mark here. I want to thank you all live in the chat here and on Twitter. You guys can follow us at hockeyroyalty.com. Articles pumping out every single day. Our Twitters have been scrolling along the bottom, but for those who aren't watching it live, at Rando Commando 24, at NHL Russell, at JW Paterino, and follow Hockey Royalty at hockey_royalty. Thank you, as always, to our lavish sponsors at DraftKings for all that you do for us and our network, the Hockey Podcast Network. Man, great episode, guys. We'll be back next week with more hot content here, trying to always get you guys guests. So thank you guys for being loyal fans and listening to the stuff that we put out. Really appreciate it. And as always, go Kings, go.
Go Kings.